to thank Northrop Grumman for being one of the two sponsors tonight of both the reception and the cable broadcast. And the Pakistan American League is the second sponsor, a wonderful organization that is engaged in a lot of people-to-people work. They connect the Pakistani community with American leadership and are deep believers in the effectiveness of people-to-people work. And so we'd like to thank their organization, especially Dr. Chaudhry, for that. You've all read the flyer describing the ambassador's career. She's a journalist, she's been a politician, she's a scholar, PhD from the London School of Economics, and of course an editor of the largest English speaking paper in Pakistan, The News, ambassador to the United States 94 to 97, and again now, fortunately. She was good enough to be with us 5 years ago, and we enjoyed that visit very much. And as many of you know, Time magazine in 1994 listed her as one of the 100 people likely to shape the 21st century. We're delighted to be joined by Ambassador Lodhi. Madam.
I need to get this down so that I can see people and you can see me. President Frank Byrd, members of the Council, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. In Pakistan, we say Assalamu alaikum. I'm delighted to be here today. I must apologize for the delay. The traffic was just incredible. I now know how to get to this place a lot better when I do it the next time round. But thank you for your patience, because I know that the issues that we would like to discuss today are serious. And I again thank you for joining us and allowing me this opportunity of sharing my thoughts with you, Pakistan's perspective on the security issues that confront our region. I know that the Baltimore Council on Foreign Relations has been playing an important role in providing a forum for discussing such issues. And I'm also aware of the long list of distinguished speakers that you have had in the past. Of course, Maryland has been the home to many distinguished and enterprising Pakistani Americans like Dr. Nisar Chaudhry, who have themselves made a very significant contribution to the promotion and strengthening of relations between your great country and mine. So thank you, Dr. Nisar Chaudhry, for your efforts. And thank you, Council, for giving me this opportunity to try to share with you some of the vexed issues that we in the region confront and the efforts that my country has been making to address these complex issues in South Asia. And I'd like to also at the end touch upon the role that the United States can play in furthering the goal of security in South Asia. But let me start by doing something which is rather unfashionable, which is quoting ex-President Bill Clinton. He once described South Asia as the most dangerous place on earth. And it's now become a widely accepted characterization of South Asia. In fact, ever since the ex-president said that, this particular phrase has been invoked frequently to describe the perilous situation that we confront in South Asia. We, at least in Pakistan, agree with the ex-president. We think this is the most dangerous place in the world. We believe this for many reasons. There are daunting socioeconomic challenges that confront all the countries that make up South Asia. And these daunting challenges have also, in a way, festered or produced a situation in which disputes within societies that make up South Asia and disputes between states that make up South Asia have been festered. I'm talking here, of course, about issues of economic underdevelopment, of social deprivation, of poverty, and the kind of intolerance that these socioeconomic conditions then promote as a result. Now, added to this, of course, is the long-standing troubled relationship between my country and, of course, our neighbor, India, and the nuclearization of our region. And these factors together have created what we think is a very precarious security situation in the region. South Asia continues to suffer from lack of accelerated economic development. It continues to suffer from lack of regional stability and the threat of continued confrontation. And in fact, and it is tragic, that these factors are holding back the countries of our region from realizing their true potential. Because of these factors, in fact, the people of South Asia who've achieved such tremendous success in their endeavors abroad, in fact, in this country as well, have remained unable to break out of the confrontational path that we in the region have seen between Pakistan and India, and they've been unable to replicate the success that they have found in other countries in their own region. We, of course, in Pakistan recognize that the challenges that South Asia faces today are formidable. But we believe that it is possible to address these challenges effectively and put South Asia on a path to peace and prosperity, and of course, greater integration with the wider world around us. We believe that it is possible to create a secure and stable South Asia which contributes positively to international peace and stability. We in Pakistan do not see security in narrow, unidimensional terms. Military security, we understand, is but one important dimension. And while recognizing its importance, we believe that efforts to increase one's military security should not occur at the cost of the security of others. We also believe that the threat perception of smaller states in South Asia and the national security imperatives imposed on them by the actions of the larger states, larger regional states in South Asia, are of equal importance. That said, I can tell you that Pakistan believes in an all-embracing definition of security for ourselves, including not just military, but also political and economic stability, social, religious, and political harmony. It is this comprehensive security that, in our view, could provide the internal strength to South Asian countries and enable them to play a positive role at the regional and international levels. Such efforts could be strengthened and promoted by the international community, particularly the United States, through sustained and balanced economic and political engagement with the regional countries, with the countries that make up South Asia. It is our view that South Asian security is challenged by the interplay of several factors operating at different levels. In fact, in a symbiotic relationship, these factors directly impact on security in our region. And the factors that destabilize South Asia and undermine regional security can be identified as operating essentially at three levels. First, the domestic or the internal level, or the intrastate level. Second, the bilateral or regional level, that is between South Asian states. And thirdly, at the global level, where of course international developments have a bearing and an impact on our region's security. Let me quickly deal with all three levels. So let me turn first to the internal or the domestic level. As you all know, and I know I'm speaking to an informed audience here, South Asia is home to 1/5 of all humanity. But even after over half a century of our independence, South Asian nations have been unable, so far, to break out of the vicious cycle of poverty, deprivation, and economic underdevelopment. In fact, South Asian countries are considered to be amongst the poorest in the world. They are certainly at the lowest rung of countries in terms of social or human development indicators. Few in South Asia have access to such basic things as clean drinking water. Fewer have a permanent roof over their heads. even less, have health facilities that they can afford. Education is available only to the most fortunate. There is an acute deficit of economic opportunity. Obviously, life in these conditions is tough and often short. And economic deprivation, illiteracy, and unemployment provide a fertile ground for intolerance and for extremism, which in turn promotes conflict and violence within societies. It's not surprising then that South Asia has seen intolerance of different kinds, ethnic, religious, communal, and of course it has also seen political conflicts, as I said, within countries and between countries. And of course, tensions within and between peoples frequently reinforce tensions between countries of the region. South Asian governments in the past have been unable to address these challenges, either because they have been preoccupied by real or imagined threats to their national security, or by great power ambitions sought through the domination of others in the neighborhood. This has resulted in hostility and a legacy of festering disputes, preventing our region and our governments, in fact, in the region from fulfilling the social contract with their people. We in Pakistan are in the midst of one of the most critical transitions of our political history. We are working strenuously to strengthen our economic base, address the challenges that we have faced in recent years of internal security, which has emanated in turn from the kinds of conditions that I've just described: rising political intolerance, different forms of extremism, whether they're ethnic or they're provincial or they're religious. But we are trying to reverse what has happened in my country for the last several decades. And we're trying to do this by trying to empower the people at where it counts, at the grassroots level. By providing economic security and strengthening moderation and tolerance, we're trying to deepen harmony, pluralism, and establishing the infrastructure so that a democratic restoration in Pakistan becomes a durable one and is not subject to interruptions as it has been in the past. In short, we're really seeking to translate the vision of our founding fathers, of the founder of our nation, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. It was his vision that Pakistan would be a Muslim country, which would be democratic, moderate, and as he put it, at peace within and peace without, committed to peace within our frontiers and committed to peace on our borders. We believe that some of the reform efforts that are underway today in Pakistan, we will be able to realize his vision and the vision which reflects the aspirations of 140 million people of Pakistan. And that vision is a vision of a modern, progressive, liberal, but Muslim Pakistan. But a Pakistan that finds its place not just in the region, but in the International Committee of Nations, a position of respect and a position that it deserves. We feel that the US can assist in our reform efforts, because today our reform efforts we see as nothing short of a defining moment for ourselves, for our nation. And in this defining moment, obviously we look towards help, understanding from our friends. And the United States, as you all know, has been a long-standing friend of Pakistan, a friend with whom we have waged many a struggle, and in fact, together with which we fought the last of the Cold War conflicts in Afghanistan, which in turn was to become a contributing cause to the chain of events which led to the end of the Cold War. We, at least in the region, do not think that it was a coincidence that the year in which the Soviet Red Army was forced to withdraw from Afghanistan was the very year that the Berlin Wall fell. Our contribution in this seminal event is not something that I want to dwell on because I think it's well known to you. But we feel that given this past history of cooperation, and cooperation on the side of the forces of freedom, we ought to be able, in the future, to look towards a partnership between your country and mine, a partnership for development, a partnership that addresses the needs, the aspirations of the people of my country, as well as the people of our entire region. Now, turning to the regional level, I identified some factors which contribute to instability, which emanate from the internal or the domestic level. At the regional level, security in South Asia, to us in Pakistan, is affected by several factors, including unremitting efforts by the largest nation of South Asia, India, to increase its defense, conventional as well as nuclear capabilities, and its refusal, even after 53 years, to address the core issue that divides Pakistan and India, which is, of course, the issue of Kashmir. It also stems from an urge to dominate the region. And together, these actions, we feel and find, are inherently destabilizing and have far-reaching consequences for the regional security environment. The quest for military superiority by India through a resort to an excessive and unrelenting armament campaign has left a deep sense of insecurity amongst its smaller neighbors, and of course my country is amongst the smaller states of South Asia. Our neighbor, India, has the fourth largest military machine in the world, with an overwhelming advantage over Pakistan in land, air, and sea forces. India also has one of the largest nuclear establishments in the world, and in fact, only a year and a half ago, articulated an ambitious nuclear doctrine that envisages the development in the future of a large nuclear arsenal based on the classical triad of land, air, and sea-based assets. We've also seen our neighbor increase its defense budget in the last 2 years by almost 50%. Now, these factors, predictably and inevitably, have bred insecurity and engendered a conventional and nuclear arms race in the region, which we feel we do not want to engage in, which we feel would be destructive for all the countries involved in any kind of an open-ended arms race. Not only would this turn precious resources away from where they are really needed, which is the development needs of the region, but it would also create a precarious security situation. We in Pakistan have no intention to enter into such a dangerous arms spiral. We have reacted with great responsibility and restraint to such provocative behavior on our borders. But we too need to keep a credible national security capability so that we have the means and the security that comes with the means to deter external aggression against us. In our view, strategic restraint, defined by maintaining nuclear deterrence at the minimum possible level of nuclear capability, offers a real opportunity to both Pakistan and India to prevent a destructive and, in fact, a self-destructive arms race. We also believe that we share this objective with the United States. There is a clear interest that converges between Pakistan and the United States in seeing that South Asia does not go down the path of a destabilizing arms race. And we feel that this is the time for Washington to play a constructive role and help create a regime of restraint in South Asia, which enables the two countries to step back from an arms race which nobody can predict where it will end. We feel Pakistan has already proposed a strategic restraint regime to India, and we feel that this is a proposal that the US and Pakistan can work together in order to seek India's acceptance of this goal. One of the key components of such a strategic restraint regime is actually to say that we do not want to go down the path that we saw the superpowers go down during the height of the Cold War. We do not wish this region the region of South Asia, to be a region on a hair trigger alert, in an environment of hair trigger alert, in an environment where countries deploy their nuclear capabilities. Therefore, Pakistan has proposed that we ought to stop at a point where we do not take the next critical step over the nuclear threshold and get to the stage of deploying large nuclear arsenals. That is not the path that two geographically contiguous countries ought to emulate, if indeed there is an emulation of the so-called balance of terror that was there during the Cold War. We simply cannot afford to repeat that kind of fully blown nuclear balance of terror, which had all its awesome risks even at that time. But for two geographically contiguous countries to do that, I think it holds untold danger and untold risks. And we in Pakistan certainly do not want to test ourselves against such untold dangers and untold risks. Now, Kashmir, of course, is an issue that I mentioned earlier, which has divided both Pakistan and India and prevented the two countries from being able to move away from the state of confrontation that they have been in for over half a century. The fact that Kashmir has remained unresolved as a result of the fact that the people of Jammu and Kashmir have been denied their democratic right of self-determination, the fact that over 70,000 Kashmiris have lost their lives since 1989 at the hands of over 700,000 Indian troops deployed there. I do not need to go into the catalogue of human rights violations that have gone on there. I think these have been very amply documented by reputable international human rights organizations. But what is clear is that the current efforts to try to misrepresent the legitimate indigenous freedom struggle in Kashmir as some kind of cross-border terrorism is really a travesty of the facts. It's a travesty of reality. The unresolved Kashmir dispute continues to be a source of great instability and, of course, a serious threat to establishing any kind of genuine peace and security in our region. We certainly believe that a peaceful, negotiated, just and durable settlement of the Kashmir dispute in accordance with the wishes of the Kashmiri people is the key. In fact, it's the only way to long-term security and stability in our region. We have always been ready, able, and willing to go anywhere, any place, any time for a purposeful and result-oriented dialogue with India on this issue. In the last year and a half, my country, my government has taken a series of steps to try to put in place a genuine dialogue and an unconditional dialogue so that we can have a peace process in South Asia that begins to address this issue that is such a threat today as I speak to peace and security in our region. Among the steps that my country has taken, we announced a partial withdrawal of troops from both the international border with India as well as what is called the line of control, which divides Indian-occupied Kashmir from what is called Azad Kashmir. We have also indicated repeatedly our willingness for direct talks with India to try to find a peaceful settlement of the Kashmir dispute. So far, we found that our steps, our offers, have not been reciprocated in full measure by Delhi. Indeed, we have found that repression in occupied Kashmir has continued, and even the leaders of the Kashmiri movement, it's called the All Parties Hurriyat Conference, which is an umbrella organization of the Kashmiri freedom struggle. The leaders have not been issued the necessary papers to visit Pakistan in preparation of a wide-ranging or a three-way dialogue between India, Pakistan, and the Kashmiris to try to hammer out a just solution to the Kashmir dispute. We have from time to time asked the administration in Washington, the previous one, as well as the Bush administration, to be engaged in South Asia, to see what they can do to facilitate such a peace process. After all, the US has recognized, long-standing position of the United States has been that it recognizes Kashmir as disputed territory. The United States was also party to the UN resolutions that promised the right to self-determination to the Kashmiri people. Washington continues to state that the issue should be resolved peacefully through negotiations, and that the Kashmir dispute can only be resolved in accordance with the wishes of the Kashmiri people. All my country continues to also call for, therefore, is that if we are to look for a solution in accordance with the wishes of the Kashmiri people, we have to find a way to ascertain the wishes of the Kashmiri people. And if we are not even at the point that there is a dialogue going on between India and Pakistan, much less a dialogue involving the Kashmiris, how are we ever going to get to the point? To the point where there is some kind of negotiated settlement of this dispute, and we are able, therefore, to remove a constant source of tension, conflict, and confrontation between Pakistan and India. How are we ever going to strengthen regional stability? Now, at the regional level, I also want to point to another factor which, from our perspective, has worked as a destabilizing factor for South Asian security. And that has to do with what, from our perspective, is India's quest for regional domination. This has been a major source of tensions, and the idea and the notion that smaller states somehow have to accept the hegemony of the larger state and settle issues on terms that are only acceptable to the larger state, we find is essentially destabilizing. The attempts by India to dominate South Asia are a function of its deep-seated desire to actually become a great power, to actually get a seat on the big table. These attempts have political, economic, military, and strategic dimensions. Instead, we in Pakistan feel that instead of pursuing efforts to dominate the region, as the largest regional state, India needs to pursue policies that inspire confidence amongst its smaller neighbors, to give them an incentive to work together to enhance regional cooperation, be it economic or strategic, political, for peace and security. And we feel that the international community, particularly the United States, should have an interest in promoting such an environment. We have, of course, observed that the US and India have been working in recent years to qualitatively improve their relations. Of course, we acknowledge the sovereign right of any nation to have friends with whichever nation they please. And we do not see relations that the US develops with any country in our region as a zero-sum game. But we have to also say that we do find that any effort to construct relations with India, which are at the expense of another South Asian country, is not a situation, obviously, that we would view in a sanguine manner. That is something that will greatly concern us. And also, the United States, with this new qualitatively improved relationship with India, ought to use its new relation, its new leverage, as it were, with Delhi, to play a more constructive role, which is a win-win situation for everybody in the region, rather than to pursue a lopsided policy, which encourages one state, makes it more intransigent, makes it more unwilling to address the sources of disputes in our region. At times, we have found that over-acceptance of India's position on South Asian issues and over-accommodation of India's interests would hold the risk of strengthening and reinforcing a certain mindset in New Delhi, a certain kind of intransigence, and it would not be to the benefit of all the countries in the region. We also feel that India, in a situation of nuclear deterrence, ought to recognize that where there is nuclear deterrence, one side cannot dominate the other, cannot hope to dominate the other. We certainly believe that Pakistan and the United States can work together, seeking greater moderation in India's regional approach, and encourage India towards conflict resolution so that we're able to bury the disputes that have held up, as I said, the entire region's economic progress. Now, at the international level, obviously, there are several issues that impact on security in South Asia, both negatively as well as positively. And the reverse is also true. South Asian security also impacts on the state of international security. There are obviously stakes here emanating from South Asia for the entire international community. There's little doubt, on the other hand, that the enormous peace dividend that would emerge for the people of South Asia, were the states of South Asia to be able to resolve these differences that I just talked about and the dispute over Kashmir in particular. And there's also little doubt about the economic and trade benefits that will accrue to the global economy from a peaceful and stable South Asia. Now, we feel that the nature of international engagement, and today the United States happens to be the preeminent world power. It's in a position, it is in a leadership position in the world. But the way the United States and the rest of the international community engages with South Asia is extremely important in terms of defining the extent of security or the lack of security that we will see in South Asia. Any tilted engagement could undermine security and, in fact, compound regional tensions, even if it's the law of unintended consequences. Even if it's not intended that way, that is the effect that that would have. The advocacy by some people of building India as some kind of a strategic counterweight to China, we feel, is fraught with great danger, because it would prove to be destabilizing and counterproductive for the region, for our region, and indeed, we think, ultimately for the United States itself. Certainly from our perspective, instead of pursuing an outdated balance of power approach, American interests would be better served by a partnership with South Asia as a whole. The issue of national missile defense also holds the potential of impacting on the security situation in South Asia. I need not get into details about the knock-on effect on South Asia, which is more than apparent if such systems provoked a widely predicted nuclear and missile buildup by China. That in turn would evoke a response by India, and that in turn would lead to a chain reaction by Pakistan. Such developments, obviously, therefore, at the international level, could further complicate and exacerbate the security environment in my region, while undermining any effort to contain the nuclear arms race and build what we call a strategic restraint regime. We feel also that the nature of the international community's policy towards Afghanistan would have considerable impact on peace and security in our region. A punitive approach characterized by censure and sanctions has been the hallmark of the approach so far in dealing with Afghanistan, certainly in the last couple of years. But this has so far failed to induce any change in the behavior of the Taliban. In fact, instead, this approach has compounded the tragic humanitarian situation in our other neighboring country, Afghanistan. We feel engagement and not isolation is a better approach to deal with the various challenges which are emanating from Afghanistan. A comprehensive Afghan policy based on ground realities and anchored in reconstruction, political engagement, and support for humanitarian relief would be more effective in our view. And stabilizing Afghanistan can, in the long-term economic and strategic interests, it would be in the economic and strategic interests of all South Asian countries, including Pakistan and India. Such an outcome would facilitate the shortest access to Central Asia's energy and other resources, and of course markets for exports. The US could also immediately benefit from this opening to one of the world's largest energy resources and help the South Asian region strengthen its economic and political stability. We in Pakistan, and I will end on this note, and I'll be happy to take questions, have a vision of a security architecture for South Asia that seeks to address the sources of insecurity at all the three interdependent levels that I earlier identified. This security architecture should have, in our view, four main pillars. One, nuclear and missile restraint by both Pakistan and India. Two, an agreement between the two countries for conventional arms control. Three, the peaceful resolution of all outstanding disputes between our two countries and sources of tensions, especially Kashmir. And fourth, the economic and social revival of South Asia through regional cooperation and global integration in order to address jointly problems of poverty and deprivation. Now, each of these four pillars we feel is important in its own right, but none can be realized in isolation. All of them need to be pursued as part of a comprehensive approach to security in South Asia. We certainly hope that the US and Pakistan would be able to construct their relationship under the new administration, under the Bush administration, in a manner that enhances security in South Asia in its most comprehensive form, embracing its internal and external dimensions and political and economic aspects. I'd like to end there, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We, as you all know, try to end at about 7:10 promptly. For those of you who made very exacting plans, you're certainly free to depart. For those of you who can stay, we'd like to perhaps have 15 minutes of Q&A. Yes, sir. The question, I believe, is what's the role for the UN, and how does Indonesia as a major power fit into the scheme?
Well, I'll leave the second part for later. But the first part, let me try to answer. The UN can do so much as its member states would permit it to. I think, let's be real here. But the UN has a long-standing obligation, which it has yet to deliver on Kashmir. The UN resolutions on Kashmir go back to 1948-49, and those UN resolutions have never been implemented. And those UN resolutions had called for a plebiscite so that the people of Jammu and Kashmir could decide how they wanted to run their country or run their region. So even today, we continue to ask the UN to live up to its obligations. We continue to also ask other members of the international community, because we know that without them and without their support, the UN is unable to take any steps. The permanent members of the Security Council would have to be on board for the UN to deliver on a pledge that it made to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And I agree, sir, entirely with you. I mean, although the population is predominantly and overwhelmingly Muslim, there are others. What we call for is after all, a democratic solution. And a democratic solution means everybody has the right to go to the ballot box to decide on the way that they want to govern themselves. That's all we ask for.
We've seen a rise of what I would gently call Islamic radicalism within Pakistan, perhaps for the reasons you've mentioned. Are you at all concerned that down the line we may see a Talibanized Pakistan?
A great deal this question has been raised in the international media, and of course this question is also raised in my country's media. I think the short answer to that is concern one must always be, but concern that this is something imminent, that this is something that's just waiting to happen, the answer would be no. The reason for that is our own history and the essence of the Pakistani nation, which is moderate, which allows religion a certain place, but has never, in any electoral exercise that we've had, voted in people from religious political parties. I think if we go by that history, and that history is not old, we have seen, in fact, religious parties being marginalized repeatedly and consistently at the ballot box. Because when our people are given the right to go and express their views at the ballot box, these are not the people that they vote for. These are not the people that they would like in being in power. Now, in terms of the fallout of Afghanistan, the fallout of the Taliban being in power in Afghanistan, of course it's had a huge fallout on my country in different ways. I think sometimes when these depictions are made in the media, and I come from the media, so I don't mean to, I mean to correct it but not critique it. These flash images do not reflect all of reality. Talibanization of Pakistan, more important is the question that one has to ask is, what is the fallout of the protracted conflict in Afghanistan on Pakistan? People ask the question only in one dimension, which is, has it radicalized Pakistan? Look at what else it's done to my country. It has introduced things that never existed in my country. Proliferation of weapons, violence in our politics, something that never existed before, which came with the Afghan war. It introduced the narcotics trade, the heroin. My country has the largest heroin addict population in the world. And let me tell you, in 1980, the word heroin did not exist in our vocabulary. In Pakistan, if you ever use the word heroin, people would look at you. You know why? It never existed. The commodity didn't exist. It came with the Afghan war. And part of, it's also a price that we paid for the success that we've had on curbing the narcotics trade out of Pakistan, that it's left us with this large user population. On top of that, of course, we are still home to close to 2 million Afghan refugees, and there are more coming our way as a result of the drought and the humanitarian tragedy unfolding in Afghanistan. Now, that is quite a handful. And what have we done in the last 10 years? We've tried to live up to our international obligations. This is a neighbor of ours. It didn't matter who was in power in Afghanistan, I can tell you. People are zeroed in right now on whether Pakistan has a relationship with the present government in Afghanistan. Well, let me tell you, we've had a relationship with any government in Afghanistan. It's a fact. We don't choose our neighbors. We certainly didn't choose the Taliban. They're there, they're a reality. We do not approve of their social practices. My country and the vision that I talked about just a few minutes ago, the vision of our founding fathers, is the complete antithesis of the social practices that the Taliban engage in. Having said that, that doesn't mean that my country is about to abdicate our responsibility to the people of Afghanistan. The fact that they are in the throes of a crisis, the fact that this nation, which gave such sacrifices so many years ago, and the world may have forgotten them, we haven't because we can't, because they are our neighbors. Now, that is the kind of fallout that I wish that there was more media attention focused on that. It's not that Pakistan is just about to be, taken over by the, the Taliban's cousins, as it were, in Pakistan. That's not about to happen. But what has already happened is the havoc that the protracted Afghan war, the lack of stability in Afghanistan, has imposed on my country in so many ways, and the kind of internal law and order issues that we've had to confront as a result of having a country like Afghanistan and the problems that that country has undergone. But today, I'm told that the UN estimates that as a result of the drought and as a result of the sanctions that were imposed on the Taliban, which have compounded the humanitarian tragedy there, in a couple of months' time, they say that the new refugees to Pakistan, in addition to the other ones that we already have, could be about 1 million. They'll be close to 800,000 very soon. They could go up to 1 million. My country has had to deal with these refugees pretty much on our own. Once the Afghan war was over, once the Red Army had rolled out of Kabul, once the Cold War had been won, the world walked away. We couldn't. We live in the region. And we've had to deal with a very difficult situation on our doorsteps. And it's still tough, I can tell you that. Our resources are strained. Our Northwest Frontier Province, which is home to most of these refugees, the social fabric there has been strained over a long period of time, even though people of that region are very hospitable. But there are limits to how much you can open your own home to without any significant international help. There too, we were pleased to see that the UN Secretary General did undertake a visit to Pakistan and saw some of the Afghan refugee camps in the Northwest Frontier. But we feel that the UN should be doing much more than it has done so far. in humanitarian relief. Surely humanitarian relief does not recognize, there should be no politics in that. There are people dying there. There are people starving to death in Afghanistan. What is my country supposed to do? Look the other way because the world doesn't like the Taliban? I'm sorry, we can't do that. And we will not do that. This is our neighbor, and we owe it to the people of Afghanistan to help them in their hour of need.
The question is, why is Kashmir so important?
I think, if I understand what you mean by this, for us, it's a question of principle. It's not a question of whether it's some kind of strategic prize. This is not a piece of real estate. And we've always said that the issue of Kashmir is not an irredentist issue. It's not a territorial dispute. It's about the people of that region who were promised that they could exercise their right to define who they want to be governed by in a freely held plebiscite. And that democratic right has been denied to them. As far as whether it's a strategic prize or not, that is not an issue for my country. It's an issue of principle, it's an issue of people, it's an issue of self-determination of a people. We have tried to implement many kinds of programs to bring our population growth rate, which was amongst the highest in the world, over 3.5%. And we've got it down to about 2.3, 2.4%. It's still too high. It's still a very large country, and at the rate at which we're growing will mean that in 10, 20 years' time, we'd be doubling ourselves, or virtually so. But we have found that the best way to proceed is to have programs at the community level. And again, these things need resources. Sometimes the resources have simply not been there. But we have found that the kind of resistance that many people anticipate from the mosques in our rural areas has not been there in Pakistan. In fact, we have tried to advance these programs through a process of consensus with our religious leaders so that they're not on the opposing end of such programs. And it seems to have worked, because we do think that at the local level, unless you have the consensus of the community, and unless these issues do not become controversial issues, you're not going to go very far. But one of the factors that has, in a way, been, our programs have been handicapped by, has been lack of adequate resources, and of course, lack of adequate trained people who could go and administer some of these family planning, as we call them, family planning programs in the rural areas. But we have made progress. So I think we're headed in the right direction. It's just that we need to do much more. But it is a huge problem, no doubt.
On Kashmir, Madam Ambassador, I would say that it's an old dispute, and it's not a bilateral issue or a trilateral issue. Actually, the entire world community has an obligation and a responsibility to address this issue in addition to the United States, our Security Council. After all this, what has happened in Kashmir, even now the Kashmir is burning and the Kashmiris are bleeding. What kind of solution, a compromised or a solution without a compromise, do you envision in the near future and in long term?
Until a reference is made to the people of Kashmir, I cannot presume to speak on behalf of a people for whom the issue is one of self-determination. It is not for me as a representative of my country or my government to say that this kind of a solution would be acceptable. It is for the Kashmiri people to determine themselves how they want to live, under what political arrangement they want to live. But we do think, and we have said this repeatedly, there can be no military solution to this issue. This issue has to be negotiated. This issue has to be on the negotiating table. And the three parties to the Kashmir dispute, India, Pakistan, and the Kashmiri people, have to be at least dialoguing with each other to find what you are talking about, to even get to that point. But we're not even there yet. But there is no other way for us. There has to be a negotiated settlement.
I'm sorry that we can't get to all of you, but this has been I think, a wonderful evening, and we appreciate very, very much the time that the ambassador has shared with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.